Hello, this is Kevin with Bangert Inc. And today we're taking a look at a new release of Sage Estimating version 25. And in this video, we're going to take a look at estimate grids. So let's get started. So I'm going to open up under File. It looks like a lot of clients that we work with use the estimate catalog. But I don't know that a lot of clients realize what's really the difference with manage estimates. So I'm going to take a look at manage estimates because this is where the estimate grid comes into play. And when I'm looking at a particular job and things of that nature, everything looks very similar with just a regular open estimate. What makes this grid so different is when I click on like a branch, it will show all the estimates in that particular branch. But if I go ahead and click up at like all estimates, this would actually give me every single estimate that's in the environment that I've got rights to see at the moment in kind of a grid. So that's what we're going to focus on, is what I might be able to do with this grid a little bit. So as we're looking at this information, there's some things like in my case, I didn't do a very good job of labeling my branches. So maybe a branch doesn't make much sense, but maybe estimate names are very good and are good information and so forth. So when I'm looking at the grid, at the top here, there's a button called columns where you can actually tell it what columns you want to see. So maybe I want to see the lock state so I can tell if somebody else is in it, or maybe I can actually tell who it's locked by. So that might be handy for most clients, but in my case where I don't have multiple people using this, maybe that's not as important, but that's kind of handy if I've got multiple ones. I'm going to say that branch isn't important to me at this particular case. So I want to see the name of the estimate, how many items are in the estimate. Maybe I want to see the estimator. I might want to see the job size and duration. In my case, I'm not going to worry about that too much. Maybe I want to see some contract amounts if we're putting them in. I've got some user-defined fields where I've got whether reports should be included on the dashboard or on reports and so forth. And I've also created me one for pending estimates and so forth, so I could tell what is pending or awarded or lost estimates. Now, this is something that I'll plug down in the description. There should be a link for Sage Estimating Release version 23's highlights that goes over like user-defined fields, because it talks about how to set these user-defined fields up, how to set up drop-down boxes for them, so that way you can have awarded and lost and pending in the drop-down list so someone could select instead of typing it each time. So I'd highly recommend taking a look at that link if you want to know how to set these user-defined fields up with the drop-downs and so forth. Maybe I also want to see the cities and states. The bid date sounds good. What type of project it was might be handy. What database, when it was last modified. I'm going to keep these on for right now just so that way you could see them. The grand total. Now, some of these fields won't work in my first attempt because I don't have another feature turned on called External Reporting Database. So some of these fields I'm going to just turn on for now, but they won't show up until we kind of go through a later step to show you how to turn on the external database or external reporting database. And I'm going to say that's close enough for now. And looks like I left my branch on. I thought I turned my branch off. Turn branch off. So this is where I can see the estimate names, the estimator, whether I want to include this report on a dashboard report, whether they're awarded or lost, the city, state, zip, pretty much whatever I taught it with columns. And as we go through, there's different things that I might want to be able to keep those layouts for different reasons. So as I'm looking at this, if I want to see a list of my estimates, or if I want to see a list of all the estimates that we bid in a particular bid date or something of that nature, those are all things that I might create different layouts for that information. So as I'm looking at this, I might say that this information here might be good just to, I'm going to say save as. And if I want to share it with other people or not, so in this case, I'm just going to say that's a personal one. And that way it basically saved these particular columns that I've got turned on. Now, when we save these layouts, it also saves maybe how I'm sorting it. So if I double click on a column, I could sort by that column. So that way I can see data ascending and descending as I'm looking through the list. So if I want to see everything by dollar amounts, descending or ascending or things, just by double clicking, it'll actually sort that list. If you notice, there's also a little funnel next to them. So if I wanted to go through and say, well, all I want to focus on right now is just my estimates. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, I just want to see, and it built me a drop-down list of what's in there. Or I could actually say that it starts with or contains or something of that nature also. I'm going to say filter, and now you'll notice that this list is actually filtered down to just the jobs that I'm flagged as the estimator on. So there again, as I'm going through making these changes, I've got to kind of think about, is that a change that I want to change for my basic columns? No, in my case, I want to set up another new one. So if I did want to save the basic column one, I could just hit save layout. In this case, I'm going to say save layout as, and maybe I'm just going to say my estimates. So if I take the look at the basic, that's back to all the estimates on the environment, versus if I go back and say, well, I just want to see my estimates, those are all the estimates that I've got flagged as the estimator. Or maybe I want to do another twist on that, and I want to just look at the ones that I've still got to work with. I've still got to focus on these particular jobs here. So in my case, I've only got 2 estimates that are flagged as pending right now that haven't been awarded or lost. So maybe those are critical ones that I should be kind of keep an eye out for those. So maybe I want to go ahead and say save layout and my pending estimates. So there again, kind of neat, because this is the key of what they really added in this part was they've added a few columns, I believe, but then the ability to actually save these columns and these filters that I could just basically go back and retrieve them pretty easy and so forth. The filters are pretty darn powerful too as you're looking at them, because as you're going through and looking at like contract amounts, you can play the game of is greater than this and is less than this and all those type of things. So very powerful of, I'm looking for a particular type of a project. So I could go through there and say, okay, I'm looking for other things that we have done that is a office space. Bang, there's a list of them. So take a look at that. That is very handy when somebody's going back and trying to do like preliminary estimates where I can find other estimates that match things. So I can say, here's some other estimates that we've done that are foul of this same thing before I get into building a new estimate. If there's not much scope, I can kind of use the arsenal of prior build estimates and so forth in that list. As I'm going through there, if I said, let's go back to my pending estimates there. So keep in mind, since you can customize these columns, and you can also create user-defined fields. If this pending view, it might be something handy if I had, what's their next follow-up update? Who's the contact information I should be following up with? Things of that nature that I could actually put in here. I've got one client that they've got someone that pretty much in the office dishes out what estimator is going to be doing the estimate. So they can actually go into there and create an estimate, flag who the estimator is that's going to be doing or build the estimate, put their name on it. May not have any detail in that estimate yet, but they at least get an estimate created. So that way, when that estimator goes in and looks at their list, they see, bang, here's a new estimate it looks like was put on my plate this week, and those type of things. Pretty powerful. So as we go through there, that's just a quick way to be able to save it, lay it out, that type of thing. Let's go ahead and just go back to a bunch of columns. Estimate names, counts, estimators. So as you're looking at all these different columns, once you also get your columns on, this search is also kind of handy because it can actually go through both estimates and whatever columns I've turned on for that information. So if you notice, I've just got KEV at the moment. So it's found that I've got KEV in this particular estimate. It's also got KEV in an estimator's name. So wherever that particular tidbit is, so sometimes if it's not necessarily in the estimate name, but it's in the architect's name or something of that nature, instead of even going to that column, maybe I could put in some sort of tidbit of information, and that way it could go ahead and filter to say, yep, there's everything with SC somewhere in the mix of things. So as I look through there, these all popped up because they had schools in the project type. and it looks like a couple of them all said SC in names and so forth. So pretty quick way to find existing estimates when I'm looking for that estimate that I'm having troubles finding. How many items are in the estimate? If we look at just some of these different columns that we threw out there, it's also kind of neat because you can see who was the one that modified this estimate last, when was the last time this estimate was modified, and things like that. And then some of the other values that we'll see in a moment here, so I can go through there and see all the different grand total add-on amounts and things like that we'll see in a moment. So with that being said, let's take a look at how to get some of those other columns. So when you've got an estimate, some of these different values that I'm about ready to talk about are not necessarily stored in the estimate. So if you think about an estimate total, a grand total, the estimate itself stores like all the line items. It stores all your add-ons and things of that nature. But trying to get that deciphered out is kind of a challenge if I was building a report or something of that nature. So they've actually created some time ago a button for or an option where you can actually create a database built where you can have things like maybe some of your add-ons can be allocated, some of your things, so that way people can build reports in Power BI. So there's a Power BI report I've got out there, or a YouTube video out there that kind of show how you can create dashboards with Power BI that maybe I can have different totals already stored in there. So that way it knows what the grand total is. So at this particular case, I don't have that set up at the moment. So if I try to look at some of these other totals, it's going to let me know that I've got no other external database set up. So that's why I'm not getting anything in those other columns. So I want to take a moment and actually show how to set that up because it's pretty quick and so forth also. So I'm going to go to my management console. And in management console, if I've got the security rights, I'll see the different buttons going across the top, and external reporting is what we're talking about. And basically create a new one. All I really have to do is in this little box right here, there's a button that allows me to create a new external database. And I could basically just leave it at the same. I could end up with multiple configurations and things like that. So I could get into different names for different reasons and so forth. In my case, I'm just going to include all the estimates in it, and I'm going to include all right users to have rights to it. So in this case here, that's all it takes to set up an external database. With that external database being set, this is where I can also tell it, do I want to allocate add-ons? Do I want to include my overline totals or things like that? Do I want to generate my excluded alternates in the mix and things like that? So I get kind of how, when it stores this other set of the data, what's it storing in it and so forth. Do I want to generate only my project information? So theoretically, that's what I'm primarily using right now is really just my project information for the totals and so forth. This is also where you can tell it to generate the data whenever you close the estimate and so forth. So that way, anytime somebody goes off and works with the estimate and updates it and so forth, it can go back and re-update these totals. Now, in my case, I don't have enough jobs out there that it really doesn't matter if I have this set at the moment or not, because it's so fast to generate it. But in my case, I'm going to also leave it on just so that way it does. So if we go back to where we're at over on the estimating side, back to my manage estimates, now I should be able to find, I've got an external database out there. So I just go through and pick it. As I go to the right, I'm going to notice that I see all this box that says totals are needed to be generated to know all this information. So I could go down through there and just tell it what estimates I want it to generate. So if I'm talking about trying to export this out to somewhere else or things of that nature, maybe I want these totals. I can also, in my case, there again, since I don't have a whole bunch of estimates, it's not going to take that long. So I can hit generate totals at the top here, and that will tell it to go through there and generate all my estimates. So it's going to basically tell me that, hey, if you got a large number of estimates, so if I'm one of the clients that I've got a couple clients out there that got, I think one of them has almost 60 gigs worth of estimates out there because they've used the product so long, you may not want to go ahead and just tell it to do them all in one shot. So in this case here, what you might want to do is you might want to say filter and just do all the estimates for this year and then generate them or something like that. In this case here, I'm going to say, I don't have that many, do it anyway. And you'll notice as it goes through there, crank it through each one of my estimates, it's going through and updating those other values that now I can use for exporting out. So now I see my grand total, I see my total of the estimate, I see if I've got any add-on dollar amounts, I see what my labor amounts were, some of those type of things. So those can all now be used for maybe exporting or graphing or doing something else with it. So with that being said, once I get that information, the main thing that I see this information being good for is primarily knowing the grand total of each one of these estimates. In some of the videos I did before, I was using like contract amount where I was having to go through and put a contract amount in for different reports and things like that. So I think this is really powerful in the fact that I can go through there and have the grand total. So that way it's not me typing it in, it knows what the grand total of that estimate is as we go through. And there again, you could do filters by it or whatever. This is also then where you could say you wanted to export this stuff out. So in one of the videos, I kind of go through and I've went through probably and said that I want to see just projects that I want to include on the dashboard. And basically what this gets me is there's many times that people create mini estimates before they get the final award or lost or things of that nature. So in my case, if I did 15 different revisions of an estimate before we are awarded the job, I don't want to see that in some of my reporting. So that's kind of what I'm using this include on my dashboard flag as, is really each job in here once. So that way, when I'm looking at my reporting, it's a more truer proportion for my numbers. So that way I'm not oversaturating the 10 copies of the job it took me to get to this one awarded one or lost and things of that nature. Once I have the information, then this is also where that information can very easily be exported to dump it out to Excel or something of that nature. One of the other things about exporting that I'll mention here is I would also recommend if you take a look at the YouTube channel, we've got a video out there that should be in the description link too, I believe, called What Can AI Uncover for Your Sage Estimating? So in that example, I take this exact grid that we're a similar grid with what we're looking at here. I hit export, copy it up to, I don't remember if I used Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or something like that, but they all do about the same thing where I told it to graph the information for me and it was able to go through there with just that little export and say, here's each year, here's what different business sectors we're doing at that particular time, and just kind of doing some analyzing of that information. So that's one of the biggest things that I see really being handy about getting this data and getting it into some exportable bases. That way I could put it somewhere else to analyze it and show me what are our trends, what's our better hit ratio. If I've got to make a decision on 2 projects, what's my most likeliness of being able to bid it? And you could do some pretty bizarre things because with the bid winners in here and so forth, when I lose a bid, maybe I know who I've bid against. So I could sit there and say, if we're doing a school, who's the top competitor of who I've lost those bids to? So maybe I could see if they're bidding these current jobs, or those type of things might affect what I put on there for profit, or some of those type of things when I'm trying to figure out where to come in on that final number. So anyway, that's a little bit about estimate grids and so forth. So the main thing is being able to come in there and save to update whatever the last filter or change I made was, save as new if I want to create a new one, going back to layout. So that way, if I want to come back and say, well, I want to now go ahead and share this with someone else on the system, this is where I could go back in and share them, give them more of a description if I wanted. This is also where I could come in here and duplicate one if I wanted to then make a revision of it or remove one that I don't need anymore, that type of thing. So check it out. That's basically one of the things that was updated in version 25 here on the estimating side. And thanks for watching.